too. So we're going to introduce ourselves a bit. Go ahead, Carla.
Okay, so I'm Carla, this is Yessie, and we're here as representatives from YVO, and YVO is an initiative dedicated to empower adolescents and active participants in society and in activism, especially in public schools, and we represent schools from all over the New York City area, from almost all boroughs, and very diverse sense of community, diverse sense of people in our organization. So I feel like, YVO, I mean, I may be a little bit biased, but YVO is just a place to be. And YVO, the whole, basically purpose of YVO, and hence DY and YVO, is YVO, but also youth vote, because that's sort of that is our mission, into encouraging the youth to vote. So YVO works to combat low voting rates by getting young and passionate people like yourselves to make a difference. And this can be voting, or even just telling your friends or telling your story about activism. And we are also youth activists ourselves. Yessie has been in YVO since the very beginning. I came in, I think a year later. So we definitely have a lot of background in terms of activism, but activism also looks very differently. Yessie, what does activism look like to you? You want to share?
Of course, I would love to share. So I just want to give my background a little on YVO. I was lucky enough to find YVO through my school. Although many schools don't have civic education, I think my school was one of the schools in New York City that had a bit of it. I took a youth activism course, and that's when my activism began, I believe, because I was very ignorant about if I should vote or not, or what does voting mean. My parents always put in my head it doesn't matter, they just want money. And it's once I joined YVO, I really understood the power behind voting and what it means to actually gain intellect in different aspects of issues. So I began with the Flint, Michigan, the contaminated water. That's where my activism really began, where I was sharing in Washington Square Park what was happening, because it was the start of it. So I was just making people aware. And now I'm in YVO, been there since fall 2017, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was just that little girl that wasn't speaking up at all in high school. Now I'm a facilitator and the social media director, and also work hand in hand with others to do work like this. This is a form of activism where we're allowing you to gain intellect through our program and sharing other stuff that you can do, which you'll find out soon.
Yeah. To add on really quickly, I found YVO in a very similar way. It was just a little poster on my guidance counselor's wall, and it was are you passionate about voting? Are you passionate about youth activism? And I'm yeah, that's definitely something I'm definitely interested in, because once the 2016 elections happened, everyone's mindset, everyone's just headspace was just very different in how we see our government and our society. So I definitely had that sort of change in mindset about voting and what I can do personally. So that was pretty much my founding of YVO. So yeah, but we can pose a quick question, what does activism look like to you guys? What do you when you hear the word activism? What do you think of? What do you see? What do you envision? You could unmute yourselves or say it in the chat, whatever is. It's up to you.
Most comfortable. We want you to feel comfortable.
Okay, so justice. Definitely hear that. Advocacy for change and justice, for sure. Fighting for the change you want to see. Yes. Literally, yes. Teaching others about a topic they don't know about. Activism is fighting and advocating for change, spreading awareness. Love these answers. Period. Equality and spreading it to others. Okay. Vibe. All right. Yeah, these answers are. See, activism looks different to pretty much from all the answers that we've seen. It's not one thing that you could sort of define. It's very different from everyone's perspective. So, protesting society and society's inequality. So yeah, I love it. I love it. So
I add one thing. I think financial boycotts are that's a really strong form of protest that I always think of. Right now, me and Amazon, I'm fighting with my inner self Do I cancel the membership? It's so convenient. So I always think of like financial boycotts. I think those are super powerful.
Yes, that's such a great point you bring up for sure. Definitely putting our morals where our money is as well, and understanding like exactly like who we're supporting, why we're supporting, and everything like that. So yeah. So you wanna go to the next slide, Yessie, or?
Yeah, I just want to say Weibo has been doing a lot before we move on. So we've been lucky enough to work with youth over this past year doing campaign work, and we actually did a whole website. It's called Weibo New York .org/go vote, and you can find information of actually how to maneuver through the voting process, how to register to vote, how to find your poll site, how to find your early poll site, how to do absentee, and all of that. We also include information about the pros and cons of each, some opinions, what else you can do besides voting if you're too young, because we definitely do work with high school students so that we know so that they are aware of what they can do in and outside of the ballot box. But yeah, and now in the summer we have been doing a lot. We've already been doing a lot teaching them history, which we will see in the next coming slide.
And real quickly before we move on, the link is in the chat box. Someone asked for the link of the website, so just letting everyone know it's there so you guys can check it out. So yeah. But yeah, move on to the next slide.
Awesome.
Okay, so up here we have two definitions of vote and barrier. So the first definition, so vote is a noun, a formal expression of opinion or choice, either positive or negative, made from an individual or body individuals. So that's pretty much like the definition of vote. And then for barrier, anything built serving to bar passage as a railing fence, or some type of thing that's not letting you like access that other.
Yeah, it's more of the number 4, a limit or boundary of any kind. I just put up the whole definitions. Also vote for the third one. It says the right to such expression, which can mean can say the meaning of vote. I just want to ask the question, what is a voting barrier based on these definitions, or the definitions you have in your mind, or something you heard about? What does a voting barrier look like? What does it mean? What is it? If you can just shout out maybe on the chat.
Yeah, we can form our own definitions. It doesn't have to be limited to just these definitions on the screen. So,
do we have a voting barrier definition?
I think voting barrier means you're stopping someone from vote. You're stopping someone's right to vote by restricting them. So voting restrictions basically are the voting barrier.
Yeah, that's a really great definition for sure.
Anybody else? I'm just writing some stuff so we can just remember what y'all all said. Or do you agree with? Sorry, what was your name? Amir?
Yeah.
I'm just like screen sharing, so I can't really do both and annotating. Thank you, Amir. Does everybody agree with Amir, or you want to add before we move on?
Yeah, in the chat, a voting barrier to me is anything that would deter someone from voting. I totally agree. A lot of people are saying they agree with Amir. I agree with Amir. I think that was a great definition, but if there's any other ideas, any other things you guys want to share, then please, by all means.
Do you want specific examples of them?
We're going to get into that. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we'll move on.
Yeah, perfect segue.
Yeah. Okay, so I think I have to delete this, or then it will just be there. Or we'll just remember it. So what do you think the biggest current barriers are before we go back into history? What are the barriers to youth voting, and maybe any other barriers you're thinking of when it comes to voting?
Poll lines for sure. Voting IDs, experience. Yeah. For sure.
Voting ID experience. Anybody else?
Knowledge.
Yes, I was just about to say that. Let's also talk about like civic engagement and civic education, how that certainly plays a role in many of you actually going out to vote, and how if you're not voting in your first, there's a statistic, I forgot what it was, but if Sandra's here, she'll correct me, about how if you actually vote in 2 elections when you're young or something, then you're most likely to keep on voting for like a lifetime.
You got it. That's exactly it. If you vote in the first 2 elections for which you're eligible, so like when you're 18 and 19, the research shows that you are likely to be a voter for life. It's a habit that you maintain.
Yeah. So like I said, civic education plays an extremely important role when it comes to these barriers, given that if you don't feel comfortable enough to go out to vote, it's usually because you feel a little like you don't have knowledge in voting. A lot of people that I've come across, I don't even know how to vote. I don't even know what that looks like. I don't even know what the ballot means. And if we have that in schools, it would be a different story. Like, we're not taught in school about this usually. And many states are actually behind in lowering the voting age and enacting automatic pre-registration voting, which is another barrier in itself. And we'll talk about that after this. Anything else besides about the barriers? Is there anything else?
In the chat, Elena said, I've also heard that if you don't vote consistently, they will purge you from the polls or from the room. Yeah, I think you may have meant polls.
Oh, from the roll. I guess the voter rolls.
Oh.
I mean, I don't know if that's like true everywhere, but I've heard at least in like Georgia, they've been trying to like they've purged people from the voter rolls, and so I don't think it's like an automatic thing, but I do have stuff about that.
Yeah, I think I've heard something about like that. Definitely sounds familiar, so I've for sure. And yeah, we also need to be taught this in school. Exactly, like civic engagement definitely needs to be taught in school. There's supposed to be a week, civic engagement week in I think either March or April.
Yeah.
And I was supposed to be like ahead of that in my school, but it was just like trying to get all the knowledge out there, trying to like tell my peers about it. It was just a very big mess, very unorganized, and it's a shame because students need to know this information in terms of civic engagement in their schools, especially in public schools and such. So yeah, but we could go on to the barriers. Yeah. So, Yessie, do you want to start or? You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
Is it sharing is paused?
Yeah, it's
okay. I don't know why it's paused. Sorry, I shouldn't have unshared. Let me figure this out real quick. So we're just going to talk about the actual history of voting barriers. A lot of people are unaware of how much we actually went through to make sure everybody got the right to vote, and we're still working on that actually, like felons and a lot of other people, residents. So we're just going to share a presentation that we actually did with the summer cohort. We used something called a Padlet, and Sandra actually put this together and put it in a presentation, and we're just going to share a couple of things that was in history and or past, such as like women's rights to vote. But yeah, let me just share the screen now.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay. Ooh. Okay, so from the first slide, you can already see this has been in existence since 1776. So we have been fighting this fight for centuries now. And it's continued all the way into the 1700s. And I'll read like the third little box where it says from 1790 to 1820, 4 states changed their laws, taking the right to vote away from men of color. Massachusetts changes its laws, taking the right to vote away from Native American men, and I think it kind of trailed off. But yeah, so states and the whole relationship between the states and the government, like the federal government, and allowing who gets to vote, who has the right to vote, has always been a fight for years now. So it's definitely, this isn't just a quick thing that has just been happening just the recent years. It's been happening for a while now. So yeah, there's just some background information. If anyone has any feelings or anyone wants to add or questions, please express them, drop them in the chat, whatever. Where we want to hear, we want to know. So
yeah, and like if you see in 1790, just piggybacking off of what Carla was saying, they were actually denied the right. Like, it was insane. And then the third one says that, like Carla read out loud, that only 4 states did it. They changed their laws. So what happened to the rest of the United States? I mean, we didn't have all the states yet, but still. So yeah. And then we see in the 1848, I guess, the federal government expanded voting rights for some Mexican Americans living in some southwestern states. So we see this ongoing pattern throughout history. Where we're getting our rights. Everybody in the U.S. starts getting their rights, even if they live in southwestern states. This is where the voter barriers come into play. If you want to read that, Carla, or I can.
Wait, say that again. Sorry, I was reading something in the chat. What were you saying, Yasmin?
Oh, sorry. I'll go ahead. But as we see, this is a voting barrier. It says that states from 1865 to 1874, which is almost 10 years, states in the South found ways to deny the right to vote to Black men. We see in Georgia, it's still happening, actually. Like, we're going to speak about later on about voter suppression, which goes hand on hand on their barriers.
Exactly. And just something to add really quickly, I just saw what I was reading in the chat, a question of like who was able to vote like before. I'll actually read it out loud real quick. Yeah, so at first it was, where was it?
White men.
Yeah. So on the fourth slide, white men were able to vote. So who was able to vote before that? Then it's really always been white men with property. It was always rich, wealthy white men that always had the power to vote and always had that ability to do that. So it's always like this, the government in our society has always like kind of held them up at a higher pedestal for more opportunities and just being able to have that right, unlike other people, which is very troubling, very upsetting, and it definitely shows into history today. But just a point to bring up for sure.
Yeah, and I just want to speak on this right here, actually a barrier in itself. During the 19th century, literacy tests were put in place that kept over 60% of eligible Black voters from voting, which is insane. And it was literally questions like, which of the following is rights for, I can't even read that, but small questions about stuff that didn't really matter. They just try to suppress them because they knew they couldn't read due to masters not allowing them to read. But yeah, this is like a timeline. So let's just go now, since we got a couple minutes left and we need to move on. So unfortunately, in 2000, we see that the Supreme Court rules against allowing Puerto Ricans to vote, which is so frustrating. I'm Puerto Rican myself. They literally need federal funding. They ship so much stuff to us, and then they tax them on the stuff they ship, which a lot of people don't know, and it's very upsetting. But yeah, so anybody else knows any barriers throughout history that we didn't mention or didn't get to?
The Jim Crow laws.
Yes, definitely. Can you say a little more about that?
The Jim Crow laws were voting barriers there were voting restrictions that stopped Black people in the South, that stopped Black people from voting. And if they didn't stop them, they would give them like a literacy test and other laws and other tests that weren't possible for them to finish, or that was not possible for them
Right. Yeah, that's what we were talking about in the slide, and yeah, just another barrier against Black people once again. So. But what happened, Yessie?
Oh, I was just gonna start talking about what are possible solutions about that we know about voting barriers. What do you think elected officials could do? What can we do? If you know about OBR, maybe speak about that. So we're speaking about solutions for to ensure that there's no voting barriers.
Yeah, so we identified the problems. What are maybe some things that we can do to change that?
Protesting.
I'll start. But one of the problems that we're having in New York State currently, if you haven't already heard, is that online voter registration is not accessible as we would want it to be. You have to have an ID or a permit or a driver's license, which most 18-year-olds don't have in New York State, just because we don't really need to drive. We don't think about going to the DMV. We're not excited. Most people are not excited to drive because we're so accessible, and then they limit us when we're about to go register to vote online. And if you see in the paper form, I've said this before in another presentation, they give you the ability to either put your social security or your ID. So it should be the same way online. So
Exactly.
there's actually a bill going through to actually get that. I think it already. Nice.
No.
But there's a bill going through that is going to make online voter registration more accessible.
Yeah, and it's interesting because just back in March, Yessie and I and a couple other Y voters, we were talking to a lot of elected officials, a lot of like state senators. We were talking to public advocate Jumaane Williams, and along with a lot of other great elected officials to let them know about why it's not accessible. And seeing the voting registration form, like the paper form, I've registered people to vote before many times, and it's definitely, it's inaccessible to like a lot of people. But before you spoke, Yessie, I think someone said protesting. I don't know who that was, but yes, protesting is definitely a great way to advocate for change. I mean, you could already see from the Black Lives Matter movement, definitely some of the change that people have been making from just making people aware of like why we're so just annoyed and just angry about the situation, how we can continue to make change about that for sure. So whoever said that, definitely, I completely agree. So.
Oh, sorry. I meant to press.
And there's some other good thoughts in the chat. Thomas talked about spreading awareness through social media, petitioning the government. Amir also said using social media. Thomas and Amir would love to hear, can you share more about how we can use social media to support these issues?
Okay, I'll go first. We can use social media because there are a lot of people on social media like TikTok, Snapchat, Facebook, and YouTube. So social media would be a very helpful way, and it will allow young people like 18, 24, allow them to might change and might want to vote. So it gives them opportunities and lets them see what they can do to help America change.
Mm-hmm. Great points.
I remember, I remember 2 years ago when we were having our Senate and when we were having elections for the House of Representatives, a lot of YouTubers I were watching were saying, get out and vote. And also, about 2 months ago or whatever, when the Black Lives Matter movement kicked in again, they were all saying, a lot of YouTubers that I watched started saying, all lives don't matter until Black Lives Matter. So it doesn't have to be like a whole 20-minute video explaining. It can just be something as little as a minute at the beginning of a video to tell people how they feel about things and how they can change it.
Great points. Nia has also added in holding meetings with council members and state representatives. Oh, yeah. Nia, have you done that, or do you want to add anything about that and why it's powerful?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So like by holding meetings with like state representatives, I feel like it makes them aware of the changes that like needs to happen for voting members of the community. And like I did actually do something like this when about last year, I think, about the health centers in my school. So basically, I had to speak to state representatives about how to create change and just like a positive influence within like the school and like providing resources and different information about how students can like handle mental illness and stuff. But I feel like by like explaining to council members about ways they can create change, it makes them aware about like how the community feels and the barriers to voting within the community.
Yes, so true. Janelle, anything you want to add on to what Nia has noted? Lots of good agreement. Great. Yes, really like the point, that social media can take you so far, Janelle is noting, but also making sure that council members hear from you and know that you're really serious and that it's going to have an impact on whether you vote for them, whether you get family and friends to vote for them, and whether they get reelected. Yes, and Carla points out.
Actually, if you think about it, social media can actually make it easier to contact these representatives. You can, you know, you can add them to the tweet. You can, I guess, make a YouTube video and send it to them through email,
Yes, it makes them much more accessible when you tag them and also when you show them you've got a lot of folks behind you. It's a great point to blend the strategies.
Thank you for bringing that up, by the way. A lot of people tend to shy away from actually doing that, and it's very important to use all the resources we have, especially because social media is free and it doesn't take away, you don't have to like send a mail envelope, put a stamp on it, and it's just an easier way to communicate and see if they reply. And at the end of the day, you're holding them accountable, because if they don't reply, they look really bad. Especially if there's a lot of people tweeting and stuff.
Totally. And just building on what Yessie was sharing earlier about the online voter registration and the legislation that has been held up in the state Senate and the state Assembly. Last week, the state Senate finally, after months, voted to approve it. It still needs to get through the Assembly, so it has not passed yet. But what we heard was that the state Senate, the reason they elevated it and put it on the floor was because of hearing from constituents like you via calls, via email, and via being tagged on social media. And they need to know the public cares about this. The public is looking at this, and we're going to remember it in November. And so, and we'll share information. Like, if you are willing, we'd love for you to contact Assembly members this week about online voter registration, saying that, people your age are not able to pre-register, because now 16 and 17-year-olds could pre-register if we had online voter registration, and that this is an important form of being involved. And I think it can really make a difference hearing from you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. And quick thing, because I think we're in a little bit of overtime. I put YVote's Instagram in the chat if anyone wants to see what we're doing, how to be a part of YVote also in the fall semester. We're definitely, happy to accept people into our space. We want to have people in our space to share different ideas and just, express how you feel about voting as well. So you could DM YVote at their tag. You could also DM me. I put my Instagram in there as well if anyone has any questions and wants to follow up or whatever. So Yessie, do you have anything else you want to add? Or
I heard that we have 10 extra minutes because we started late.
Well, 4 minutes now. You have a couple minutes.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, 10 extra minutes after 2. Sorry. Should have said.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good thing.
So let's move on, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So we just want to say if you are an agent of change, you are able, like Sandra was saying, able to contact your elected officials, contact your assembly members, and get the change you want. You're more powerful than you think. You should read the book. I've read it. And actually, if you don't speak up, at the end of the day, you're only holding yourself back and what you want to see change. So we encourage that many of you step up and use your Twitter. Since you're on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, whatever you use, they're on it too. So make sure that you're on them if something is bothering you, or if you want something to be changed, or if you want them to vote for a certain law. But yeah, so do you know the actual percentage of how many young folks voted in the midterm elections?
Let's see if anyone can take a guess.
Around 10% maybe.
Okay, we can work with that.
20 to 40%, Thomas said. Okay. Guessing 10%, 30%. Okay, 20% again.
And this is for the 2014 midterms. And another question now, how many voted in 2016 of 18-year-olds? Do you take a guess before we reveal the big reveal like y'all were doing earlier of Elena? Do we have any chatters?
Yeah, 10%. It's gonna be something low, probably. Yeah. 15%. Yeah.
Okay, let's reveal it. Wrong slide. There you go.
Yeah.
So it's actually 36% of 18-year-olds voted in 2016, and over 70% of voters voted that were 70. Isn't that insane? Let's just
yeah, guys.
This, but this is an insane statistic.
It's so insanely low. That means 86% of 18-year-olds did not vote in 2014. 86% didn't vote.
How does that make you feel, like that young people are not voting, they're not putting their say into the society or government or economy? Because politics plays a role in everything we do.
Exactly. Any thoughts, any feelings? Well, maybe they didn't know how to vote exactly with voting barriers. It is, and also just misinformation where to go for your correct polling site, if you may have moved, or they didn't have the time. Yeah, lack of education around voting, 100%. Pretty much.
And that's why the work that y'all are doing is so important, and being involved in changing those numbers, changing the math, changing the political landscape.
Mm-hmm. And remember, you can always, it says New York City needs OVR now. OVR stands for Online Voter Registration. Remember that every time you see OVR, it's online voter registration. This is something you can fight for right now. Tweet at your assembly members, or Instagram them, DM them, call them, go in front of their offices if they're there, if it's safe. And register to vote if you haven't already, and if you are eligible and have determined by vote. So thank you for having us, and I hope you enjoy.
Yes, thank you guys for allowing us to enter your space again, working with GlobalKids. Yes, and I worked with GlobalKids, like I said before, in January, and it was an amazing experience, and we're just glad that YVote is able to come back and to share some more knowledge now with all of you change makers here today. So thank you.
let's give snaps to YVO. Thank you all so much.
Woo!